Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'd like to welcome my good friend, Andrew Albertson, who is the founding executive director of Foreign Policy for America, an organization that I saw him build from the ground up. And I hope today we'll kind of talk about that and all of your experiences. Andrew, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Really glad to talk with you.
Of course. I want to know where it all started for you. So give us your bio, but just talk about how you got interested in the space of international development.
Sure. I mean, for me, probably, I think this is a common story. I did a study abroad in Kenya when I was in college, and it took about a week of being there when I knew I was interested in kind of political dynamics,
Mm.
political institutions, coups, crises, conflicts, all that stuff. And then while I was abroad, 9/11 happened. And so I was always interested in, I mean, since that moment, really, political development abroad,
Mm.
development in general, and then how that links back to our interests as Americans. So yeah, so
What
that
was
was the
your
starting point. Yeah.
What degree were you, what's your undergrad in?
Yeah, I started on psychology. I ended up finishing that degree, but I did a second degree in international development in undergrad. So
And then you just knew. So you started this from like the time you were an undergrad and then you went to grad school.
I knew what I wanted to like learn more about. I mean, I think that's what about as far. After that, I actually moved to Guatemala. So I wanted to do Peace Corps, and I wanted to kind of live and learn, more directly what I had studied. Um, and and Peace Corps at that time, it's different now, but at that time they'd actually tell you where you're going to go if you didn't have a
Mm.
lot of freedom. So I just said, okay, well, I'll just move to Guatemala because I know that's why I want to be in the Western Highlands of Guatemala. I don't know if that was a great idea or not, but I ended up, going to language school, lining up some internships and a job there, doing essentially community organizing at an interesting moment in Guatemala's history, after the peace accords, when they were decentralizing, developing that like state and local government sort of apparatus.
Mhm.
Um, and then I came back to DC and, tried to find, what's that work in foreign policy look like? What does one do?
So I have a question about, so between undergrad and grad, you decided I'm going to get, firsthand experience.
Yeah.
Did you consider and weigh, that, or did you have that pressure of needing to gain full-time employment and what your peers were doing? And how did you navigate that in your head to make the choice that you made?
Yeah, so I knew what I wanted to do in college. I had my plan, but I knew I had to save up money a little bit.
Mhm.
And so I went home after college and, had a job where I was able to make some money, have a little savings. And then, I didn't spend a lot in Guatemala, to be honest. In the Western Highlands of Guatemala, it's tough to spend a lot of money. But I thought that was, a good plan was to make money in the States and then come. And then what I had to do, actually, it's a good question. What I had to do was about a year in, I planned an end date to, the internship I had at the time, came back to the States, worked again to save up some more money. And then I actually went to Cincinnati, where I grew up, and worked on the presidential campaign at the time, which we don't have to name which one it was, but it was a while.
Yeah.
It
And did
was,
you devote yourself full time to that campaign?
yeah. So I did that for 3 months as an organizer. I can't believe this is so long ago, but this is the Kerry campaign
I know.
season.
Oh, okay.
And I did
I
that.
was gonna let you not name it, and I thought it was maybe the Obama campaign.
Yes, it could be anything. It doesn't matter. But yeah, I worked on that campaign, and then I spent some time saving up money, and then I went back to Guatemala, and I kind of pre-lined up, another job to go back and stay there another year or so.
But
So
Andrew, didn't you feel the pressure of like seeing your peers like go to, whatever consulting companies or try to get, their first big job? I'm struck by how certain you were of what you were gonna do, which is like, let me continue to go back to, uh, to get firsthand experience
yeah.
in the country. And did you have parental pressure or not?
Now
Like,
that you asked that question, I'm questioning everything.
seems like it turned out okay for you.
Well, I mean, I knew kind of the work I wanted to do, and I wanted to be useful. I wanted to be impactful. And I kind of thought that was the path to gaining the skills to, have a legitimate understanding of, what I'd be working on.
And as you think of the like today, do you think, because I have students who are probably like, wow, that is really cool. I would love to do that. Do you think that's still understanding everybody has their own particularities,
Yeah.
still good advice?
To just move overseas. First of all, I do think it's a lot easier to do that sort of thing than people make it out to be. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of opportunities. A lot of the people I knew who were trying to follow a similar path just had part-time jobs in Guatemala to kind of
Yeah.
make ends meet, There's also just Peace Corps, as of today, I believe. Is it still existing? No?
As far as I know, but
Not a
I'm
path? Okay. Um, I mean, I think if you're interested in development, um, you have a couple paths to take. But all of them involve some genuine field experience, and kind of
yeah.
getting to know what it is you're talking about, and carrying back with you some, anecdotal understanding of the dynamics at play.
Hmm.
And so it's just a question of when you get that field experience. And I think for me, it was a good move to just immediately after college go and live abroad, do the hard work of kind of, trying to dig in and understand the different dynamics, at least in one place. And I thought about extending that, doing a Fulbright, which, is another good path that people can take. But there's a lot of different ways to kind of get that overseas experience, um, as a next step. So, but yeah,
Yeah, I
certainly.
mean, I think what you said about it's maybe not as expensive or the bar is not as high as people think, because also when you're in your early 20s, you're doing it solo. Um,
Yeah,
so that's maybe, and older people say this all the time, but it is actually true, which is like it's much easier to be mobile and nimble at that age than it is once you put roots down and have family and have kids in school and all of that stuff.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and also like, I mean, there's another path in the development world, and I say all this, I have no idea kind of what development world's going to exist when your students
Yeah.
done with their studies. But there's another path where you're a lifer overseas. You gain skills and experience in managing programs in tough places. Then you'll get that experience when you get it. But that's one kind of choice to make. It's kind of
Yeah.
like choosing to be a foreign service officer and just choosing that lifestyle. But
Well, I imagine a lot of people will look for ways to do this kind of meaningful work outside of working for the federal government at this point. I mean, because there aren't not as many opportunities in the federal government given the landscape, and the way it's shaping up in this current administration. So you went to Georgetown, you did your master's there in foreign service, and then what happened?
yeah, well, so while I was at Georgetown, I, when I moved back from Guatemala, I moved to DC. I didn't have much of a plan, but I emailed like 3 organizations that I thought were doing cool work. Um, One of them hired me. So the Truman National Security Project hired me as like, in their like second or third year of existence. So it's kind of a
That?
membership organization based in DC that works with a lot of like rising national security leaders. And while at the same time, I reached out to another group, which was like essentially a student club at Georgetown, um, focusing on what's the actual impact of the United States on political reform overseas, and what could it be? And this is during the tail end of the George W. Bush administration, and that was POMED, and I helped turn. I just signed up to volunteer with POMED, but I ended up helping turn it into a nonprofit, and I became the founding executive director of that organization, which brought a lot of activists and experts from the region to meet with policymakers in DC, and then and did some advocacy and kind of policy analysis on those issues.
I was going to ask you to say what POMED stands for.
Yes, the Project on Middle East Democracy. Yeah, yeah. So and now that organization still exists, thriving. It merged with another group. So it's called the Middle East Democracy Center, but still doing really important work, kind of in solidarity with reformers and activists in the region, pushing for democracy and trying to help policymakers navigate all that.
Interesting. And then from there you went to USAID?
From there, yeah, I talked to my career path, and I don't actually want to know if I want to encourage anyone to follow this. Like,
No, I know, but it's fine
not,
because it's illustrative. It was a moment in time that, like I said, maybe not exist anymore, but we
yeah,
can still, I don't know, reflect, you know?
yeah. Well, USAID, at that time we're stuck in Afghanistan. We're trying to help stand up a government that's stable. People aren't fighting, and can provide some for the basic needs and safety, the communities. And I was drawn to wanting to pitch in, so I signed up for a part of USAID called the Office of Transition Initiatives, which sort of raises its hand and goes where, like, in the takes on tough tasks. And
Where,
so
where
I
no,
got
nobody else,
to,
no foreign service officers want their assignments in those places.
yeah, yeah. And where other parts of USAID also like don't really have a toolkit that can help out as well. So OTI historically has helped out in democratic transition moments, and then also, sort of specialized in conflict specific arenas like Afghanistan. So I was helping to deliver small grants alongside military service members that were trying to stabilize areas, to help get, agriculture going, to help fix roads, to help make a whole lot of improvements, and frankly, just to help the local government take ownership and leadership of those improvements and that progress. So I did
Um,
that for a little bit with USAID. Came back, uh, worked for a US contractor, and I think that's about when I got to know you, I
yeah,
believe. Yeah, yeah,
you were just, yeah, I mean, this was the we meet at election cycles. This is the 2016
yeah,
election cycle is where we met. Where
yeah,
we were both trying to do work that you were leading around building a foreign policy constituency. And this was before the whole scorecard thing, right? But just saying that the foreign policy community has a point of view on and would like to participate in a meaningful way uh,
yeah.
in the presidential election.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting moment, right? You've got a former Secretary of State running for
Yeah,
president
yeah,
against, Donald Trump, who the most charitable view is a little at sea on these issues,
yeah.
and sometimes full of it. Um, but I think now we're seeing, has some views that are really dangerous for a lot of people. So in that first race, I just wanted my friends and networks to knock on doors and make phone calls and fundraise and do like campaign relevant stuff. I think sometimes, our community can be a little scared of politics or aloof of politics, and
Yeah, I agree.
and I just wanted to create some easy on roads for, on ramps for people to kind of get engaged in that stuff. And it was a lot of fun, and
Mm.
we ended up getting thousands of people involved. And
And raising a good deal of money.
yeah, and I think just really wonderful work until the last day, and then it was very sad. But in the aftermath of that, some other folks, and I'm telling you this story as if you don't know it very well, Zeenat, but
I want you to tell it, Andrew. This is what I want.
some other folks who had, donated and been active in that network, pointed out that every other policy sector kind of has their act together in having the fighting infrastructure that you need to really defend your values. So if you care about the environment, you can join League Conservation Voters. That'll be a home for you to take action, and they'll guide you and say, here's how we can take action together to make a difference. Alone, maybe we can't, but working together, we can actually do some stuff. If you care about, reproductive freedom, there's Reproductive Freedom for All, Planned Parenthood Action Fund. If you care about, the fight for equality, you can join Human Rights Campaign. That can be a home to fight for LGBTQ equality and rights. There's gun control groups. It's kind of a long list, and foreign policy community never really had that fighting infrastructure. And so we set up very similar to that, first and foremost, as a home for people who they want to talk about the big issues of the day, but they also want to talk about what more can we do about it. What can we do if we pool our efforts and our energy and our time and resources. So we do a lot of programming, a lot of events, a lot of bringing people together. Second is we're an advocacy organization, and so we're up on the Hill constantly sharing this is what our community's views are on this big issue. And so we just like to share that with you. If you want briefings, if you want resources, we're happy to provide. When you vote,
And
please keep this in mind and try to keep politics out of this stuff because it's too important.
right.
We
And
actually
I
have
was Foreign Policy for America is a C3.
so Foreign Policy for America Foundation is a 501c3.
Yeah.
We do a lot of media engagement, a lot of educational
Yeah.
efforts. Foreign Policy for America is a 501c4.
Okay.
Foreign Policy for America Action Network is a PAC. So it connects
Okay.
the PAC to the
Okay.
C4.
So you have all three of those things.
Those three entities. But we have that community, we have the work on the Hill, and we have a legislative scorecard, so members of Congress have a lifetime rating with us, just like they do with the NRA. We like to talk with them about, kind of how our community's looking at votes. And then, we also have a political arm, so we love to support those champions and help them win election and re-election and just, celebrate them, welcome them into our homes, tell them how grateful and proud we are.
And so if some of my students want to be involved with and any of the, the foreign FP4A, what's the best way for them to get involved?
Well, you can go to the Foreign Policy for America website and sign up as a member. Membership is free. If they are your students, then we really want to engage them in the Next Gen initiative.
Right.
We have, I think, one of the best young professionals programs of anything going in the foreign policy world. And
I totally agree with that, by the way.
great. It's an awesome community. Actually, what's wild is when we have events with everybody and they ask the best questions,
Right.
and the former ambassadors are sort of taking a step back and they all, are really amazing. So we do have applications. I know we'll do it at the end of the year. I think we might actually do a mid-year application cycle around June. And then we also have an annual summit if people want to
coming up in May, right?
May 18th through 20th, people want to come together with our community. It's a big moment to get together. I think there's a little bit of mourning of what's lost. There's a little bit of grappling with lessons learned from the last administration. There's a little bit of, all right, what are we going to do about it? And so it'll be a good moment for everybody to get together, and we're certainly looking forward to that kind of family reunion we get to do every year. Yeah,
that's great. As somebody who's spent so much time on, building democracy overseas, et cetera, what's your sense of this moment? I'm not asking you to make partisan because we're not a partisan organization, but, you see a total, a flexing of hard power, a retraction of soft power, and isolationist stance from this administration. And how do you make sense of what is happening? And then, of course, I'm gonna ask you, what would your advice be for, young people who are at the beginning of their careers thinking that they wanted to take this path?
Yeah, I mean, tough to sum up. I do think
it is.
We benefit so much from our strong alliances around the world. If the worst comes to worst and we're trying to act, defend Americans, we want to call on those allies, and that's what's it's been such a big piece of our success. So Trump's really kind of devalued those alliances, and in the worst interpretation, he's maybe feels a little bit more common cause with authoritarians like Erdogan in Turkey or Bukele in El Salvador or Putin, and that's scary for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons, you mentioned our hard power. I like that we're trying to deter China from taking action in Taiwan. Hard power serves a purpose, but some of the stuff that Trump's talking about, redeveloping the Gaza Strip and asking American service members to go secure that area, or Greenland, Canada. it is a little scary. So, anyways, that I worry for a lot of reasons where we're going. As far as what I encourage your students. First, I think we're a pretty resilient country. I think there's going to be a continuation of some measure of foreign aid. The Development Finance Corporation is likely going to grow, not shrink. The Millennium Challenge Corporation is likely going to take on more work. It's not going to go away. And State Department has its own foreign assistance efforts, and that leaves out, PEPFAR, which I think, and and public health efforts, which I think, at some level, I would be surprised if don't resume on some levels, and also, food aid and that sort of thing that American farmers have always been, so supportive of. So that stuff, I think it's going to persist. And if you're interested in development, I encourage you to continue that path and to look for ways to continue to play, meaningful roles in what our country does next. But the other thing I'd say is, and this is kind of my 2 cents to all students, don't shy away from trying to understand the political dynamics that connect with our foreign policy decision making. Really kind of digging in and learning about those. The Hill is one pathway. Other outside organizations like ours, are another pathway to sort of think at the intersection of those two things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna not challenge you, but you said that, the whole the expansionist tendencies, or at least demonstrated tendencies of this administration around Greenland or even Canada, that sort of thing is, dangerous for us, and I think a diminishing of our relationship with allies, but also in a way, I think this administration is doing what they said that they were going to do, which is what they were elected to do, and so is not, is not like a reflection of America first, or what Americans think is popular, in a sense, right? Where they're doing the things that
Oh, yeah.
you could disagree with me, but
Yeah, I don't. Sorry if I'm cutting you off. Go ahead. Sorry.
as somebody who worked at USAID, and I worked with faith-based communities, we
Yeah.
did a ton of work trying to explain the impact of USAID and what we were doing to American public. And I think we never did that at scale. And I wonder if that's a reason why we didn't see widespread support for USAID in this moment, that that it was just taken down so swiftly.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, I think the faith-based communities are a really important piece of the puzzle here, because
Yeah, I agree.
Americans don't necessarily want us to secure, don't always just focus on some abstract sense of our realpolitik interests. They want our country to act in a world that reflects in a way that reflects well on who we are. And I think we are a compassionate country, and we do care about, we do recognize that we have some resources, and or others don't. Maybe we can help out some. I think there's a different problem, which we've talked about some, which too often folks in Washington go about their day and don't try to cultivate any support from the rest of the country for what
Right.
we're doing. And I think that's been a problem for a long time. We kind of almost try to shroud our work in kind of esoteric language that's inaccessible, and there's not a lot of efforts to do public engagement or to try to cultivate popular support for good policy. So that's obviously a mistake, and frankly, it's really hard to kind of turn that around and get it right. I know a lot of people have tried over the last handful of years, and I think those efforts need to be continued. But you said that Trump's just doing what he was elected to do. To
Well,
this
I'm talking about America first, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not saying I agree with it, but I'm saying, people caring about what's happening here, not what's happening there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I do too. I care more about stuff happening here than there, and so that makes sense. Obviously, a stable world where diseases aren't flourishing, and climate changes, and having devastating effects on our community, that's better. And there are some international aspects to that. We ought to be active and trying to pursue our goals internationally, just like we pursue our goals domestically. But we are kind of coming through this insecure time when people have had a hard time with
Yeah.
inflation and coming out of COVID. And there was a necessary focus on domestic challenges. So Trump certainly played into that. But two things. One, he didn't campaign saying we should take over Greenland by any means
Ah,
necessary. I mean, no one voted for that,
that's true.
No, he didn't campaign and say we should levy extraordinary tariffs across all of our allies and partners, and risking not just prices going up, and he didn't campaign and say who cares? I don't care about people having to pay higher prices. You know, he didn't.
Right.
Not to mention like recession and further inflation. I mean, he didn't campaign on that stuff. So
No, he didn't.
to a certain extent, I think he's governing in a way, a little different way than he campaigned. But the other point is, you know, people voted for change. You know, mainly economic change in this election. And it was,
Well,
he won all 7 swing states. It doesn't change the fact it's, still a pretty narrow, gap between the candidates. 75% of voters went to the polls and said, the candidate who could deliver change was probably the #1 priority for them.
mhm.
And of the folks that wanted change as a higher priority than anything else, 75% of them thought that Trump was going to be the one that.
People just wanted something different, and we don't have to like litigate that because I think we're probably aligned on that. But I do want you to connect it back to the imperative around foreign policy for America in this moment, and in the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And then if you have closing advice for students who will be listening to this.
Yeah. I mean, so on foreign policy for America, I'll just say, taking off the career panel hat for a second, this is a big moment, we're either going to rise to the moment or we're not. And I think a lot of Americans are galvanized having seen how Trump is actually governing and wanting to know what they can do to take action. And what our community, what our team does, here, we're just trying to answer that question. If you're a student, if you're a retired ambassador, if you're anywhere in between, what can you do to make a difference? And we try to help our community to take those actions together, whether it's getting involved in advocacy, it's getting involved in calling your congressman or your senators, or it's helping to elect and reelect champions. The candidates that really like stand for our values and are taking action and not just sitting back. So if you feel that way too, and you want to join up and take action together, we'd love to have you, sign up and be part of our community. It feels good, take action and not just kind of be sad reading the headlines.
For sure.
As far as, advice for your students, man, it is a tough time, I think, to be trying to chart out your career paths, if you care about foreign affairs, or politics, I guess. But I think the advice is still the same. Figure out, what you care most about, what you're, most passionate about. Think about how you like to spend your days and what your superpower is, what your particular skill is that you've got that,
Is it research, writing, convening, being, talking to people, and although that's what,
Yeah. Are you a process manager? Are you a people person? Do you like, writing? Do you like doing, first order research that may not have applied value? Do you, are you good at kind of leading and coordinating teams? Like everybody's got like a particular skill that sets them apart, and getting to know that about yourself, not just the issue area you care about, is an important early action for you as you chart your path. But then once you know where you want to go, just kind of work backwards and figure out, well, what are the skill deficits or the knowledge deficits that are preventing me from getting there?
Yeah.
And as crazy and chaotic as the world is right now, that still holds true, and frankly, if you feel like there's a space that's shrinking, there's less opportunity, but you add some value and you really care about that, then I would totally encourage you to dive in. Maybe there's less people there and you can play a bigger role, but we probably need your investment and energy in that space.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I would say, just as somebody who's known you now, for 10 years longer, about 10 years, you really kind of dedicate yourself to something and you go deep and you build deeply. And I think that's a good example for people to think about too. So you had said, well, there was a student organization at Georgetown that I was interested in, so I just called them. And then that ended up being, you end up being the founding kind of ED of that organization that then took you to the next path. But just watching you with Foreign Policy for America, it's, you intensely build. And I think that that's something that can be, that students should look at and think about as well.
Yeah. If I could give one other lesson, just thinking about those early experiences I had. If you're a student or you're just coming out of school,
Yeah.
and you're early in your career, anyone you email, almost anyone, if you ask them, can you share a little bit with me? They'll probably say yes, and you don't get that opportunity forever, but if you're early in your career and you have some good questions and you know who you want to ask,
Prepared when you come to that meeting. Yes.
that is a great opportunity. And I seize that a lot. And sometimes I think people don't, but
Yeah.
I'd certainly encourage people to.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was intimidated. I didn't know I could do that. And so just like you have the permission and you should use it just as you're figuring out your career path. I think there are, people to us like us who are very dedicated to the fields that we're in that want to see the next gen flourish in those fields. So, Andrew, thank you for your time.
It was great talking with you.